Thank you and good afternoon. I will be talking about 1956 from the Polish perspective, and that is what happened in Poland in 1956, and probably it will show to what extent it differed from what happened here and with possible consequences. As it happened, the history of the communist Poland is symbolically marked by month-year dates. And the first of these month-year dates is October 56, then it's followed by March 68 and December 70, June 76, August 80. Sometimes the years are omitted and they're only the month, and everybody knows what these months mean. For my generation, October meant this very October 1956. And yet, October 56 is a peculiar date in Poland. First, it is a shorthand for a much longer period, starting sometime in 1955 and ending in the middle of 1957. Why October then? Oh, because at that time we had a change of power at the highest level of the Communist Party. A man called Władysław Gomułka became the first secretary after having been released from prison. In a popular perception, this marks a time of liberalization. And this perception is partly correct because as Gomułka came to power, it meant, or people perceive it to mean the end of the Stalinist era with executions, torture, and omnipresent fear. And Gomułka's nomination was preceded first by the unexpected movements of the Soviet troops. And then Poland's communist generals decided to put the Polish army on alert. And then, quite unexpectedly, on the 19th of October, we had an unexpected visit of an almost entire Soviet Politburo in Warsaw. They just landed at Warsaw Airport, all of them. And Khrushchev and his comrades tried to intimidate Gomułka and force him to keep the old Soviet flunkies in the Polish Politburo. Finally, a deal was struck and the Soviets returned. They went home, obtaining the guarantees that Poland would remain a loyal member of the communist bloc. That was 20th of October. But on the other hand, it's often argued that this October was not the beginning, but was the end of what Ilya Ehrenburg called the thaw. The cracking of the old regime could be seen as early as 1955. And the people were hoping for some genuine moves towards liberty. The avant-garde of the change were communists, some old communists, and some young communist intelligentsia. What they wanted to achieve was not, of course, a multi-party system, but something that later came to be called socialism with a human face. They wanted the Communist Party changed. They wanted to be more socially responsive, more linked with the working class. As a communist poet, first a Stalinist and then a reformist, put it in a poem that was a manifesto of change at the time. We want the reform, quote unquote, through the party, meaning of course the Communist Party, not with the help of some outside sources, societies, communities, people, but we want to change the system through the party, right? With the party, being a part of the party. So it's being said that this process of building socialism with a human face came to an end in October 56, exactly at the time it seemed to triumph. Gomułka's coming to power provoked a huge manifestation in the center of Warsaw on the 24th of October, one day after the outbreak of the Hungarian Uprising. Hundreds of thousands of people came to greet him and support him as a representative of the new beginning. But Gomułka's speech ended on an ominous note. Go back to work, no more demonstration, no more demands. One could compare it to what happened in the 19th century when what the Russian Tsar Alexander considered to be sympathetic to the Polish cause, to the Polish aspiration, told Polish nobility who implored him to undertake some reforms. And he said, point de rêverie, monsieur, point de rêverie, no more dreams. And that was actually the message of Gomułka's speech, no more dreams. And then came the Soviet aggression on Hungary, and well, the Poles knew the time of the dreams are over. There was some social mobilization during the Soviet invasion of Hungary, but people generally came to believe that the communist system is there to stay. So the October meant two things. First, it meant more liberty, real liberty, no more social realism in art, no more permanent purge as the pillars of the system. The ideological straitjacket was considerably loosened. At the same time, the October meant that people came to accept the system as their own. No more dreams of the Third World War that would push the Soviet Union to the 1939 borders. No more dreams of returning to the territories which Stalin took away from us. No more dreams of a multi-party system. Paradoxically, at the time of terror that preceded in 1956, a lot of people somehow believed that the system, evil as it was provisional and transitory, something that sooner or later can disappear. Let us not forget that at this time, the anti-communist opposition, though decimated, still continued to conduct a guerrilla war against the communists and the Soviet masters. But October 56 changed it all. People's Republic of Poland became the only Poland that existed, not only in reality, but also in dreams. The Poles could hope for a new Gomułka, for a better Gomułka, but certainly not for a Poland without Gomułkas at all. When in the middle of the 1970s, we had the beginning of what was called democratic opposition. The dominant role in this movement were people who were somehow inspired by it or came directly from the groups that were active in 1956, that they represented this plan of having a better socialism. Of course, in 1970s, starting from 1970s, they made those demands independently, not through the party, but this was their source. This was their root. October 56. Some of them were former communists. Some came from the Pole communist, even socialist, feminist. But generally, they identified themselves as the men of the left, wanting to reform People's Republic of Poland. Why such a role of former communists? The reason is simple. All non-communist, more conservative, independence-oriented groups and individuals had been already during the reign of terror either liquidated or died in war or escaped. The left-wing groups, somehow linked with communism or being a part of the system, were the only ones that survived. But one major element has to be added. The Catholic Church. For centuries, the most powerful institution in Poland, the institution that the Poles had always turned to during the most difficult times. The Church played the role of the government and the national unifier at the time where Poland was not an independent country. So it was the institution that represented the aspiration of the people at the time when there was no one else to represent those aspirations. But the Church was also the only institution that somehow managed to keep its position after the reign of terror, despite wounds, losses, betrayals. It was very strong still. It was also the only vehicle of continuity, of preserving the Polish identity during the period where the new regime used all the resources they had to destroy the identity and replace it with a new one. The Church made several concessions, to be sure, some of them very painful, but it survived. In 1953, the head of the Polish Church, the Prime Minister of Poland, Stefan Wyszyński, was interned by the communists. In October 1956, 2 days after Gomułka's speech, Wyszyński was released too. And in a new political situation, the Church gave her conditional support to the new communist government and was given liberty to conduct the mission in a public space. It did not take long, however, before it was clear that this space would gradually decrease. So Cardinal Wyszyński and the new generation of the clergy, including Cardinal Wojtyła, did not openly question the political legitimacy of the communist government. They never repeated this support, but never officially withdrew it. And yet it was clear that the Church was the only institution that could form the opposition to the regime, mainly by spreading an alternative to this version of Polish history and this new collective identity which the communists tried to pump into the heads of the Polish society. I think it is thanks to this great work of the Church that also the spirit of independence somehow survived the years of repression. So to conclude, as we can see, at least that's my interpretation, I mean, in October 1956, you can see two currents, so to speak. The first one is the communist and post-communist intelligentsia, later to be called revisionist, enlightened communist, well, whatever, social democrats. And then the other current that somehow had the backing and the inspiration from the Catholic Church under the leadership of Cardinal Wyszyński, later to be called the spiritual monarch or the spiritual king of Poland. And these two currents were developing side by side for a long time independently of each other. But slowly, very slowly, they were trying to find a common platform of action which culminated in August 1980 the month when the Solidarity Trade Union was born and triggered off the demolition of communism. This trade union, the Solidarity Trade Union, was for many years a mystery because of its hybrid composition, vibrant religiousness, a strong sense of patriotism, and at the same time, this left-wing, post-socialist ideology. This unity, one of the reasons of the Solidarity success, lasted for some time, but then, of course, the divergences were beginning to come to the fore, giving way to mistrust and then outright hostility. But how and why it happened is another story.